The sound of my son sobbing into the phone, begging me to explain why his platinum card was just rejected in front of a dozen elite country club members, filled me with a chilling sense of peace I never knew I was capable of. Before we get into exactly how I dismantled their fake plastic lives, do me a favor and let me know in the comments what city or country you are listening from right now. It really helps the channel out. Anyway, to understand how I ended up listening to my own flesh and blood have a public meltdown, I have to walk you through the agonizing reality of my life over the past 7 years since my husband Arthur passed away. Arthur was a master electrician, a man whose hands were permanently calloused and stained with grease from working on massive industrial circuit breakers. We built a very comfortable life pulling copper wire and diagnosing heavy machinery, but we lived simply. When Arthur died, he left me a substantial nest egg, a reward for decades of blue-collar sweat. My son David inherited his father's trade, but none of his work ethic, mostly because of the woman he chose to marry. Her name is Chloe. For 7 years, I have been the silent, invisible foundation of their lavish lifestyle. While David worked standard shifts as a commercial electrician, Chloe refused to work, claiming her job was to manage their social image. Every time they overextended themselves, which was every single month, I was the one pulling out my checkbook. I paid off their luxury cars. I covered the exorbitant rent for their downtown loft. I funded Chloe's designer wardrobe because she claimed an electrician's wife needed to look wealthy to attract higher-end clients for David. I smiled and swallowed my pride every time she looked around my modest, comfortable home with thinly veiled disgust, making subtle comments about how cute my outdated furniture was, or how sweet it was that I still wore Arthur's old flannel shirts instead of buying cashmere. I took it all because David was my son, and I wanted him to be happy. But yesterday afternoon, everything shattered. I was standing in my kitchen brewing a fresh pot of coffee. The smell of the dark roast was filling the room. David and Chloe had stopped by to drop off some paperwork for a loan they wanted me to co-sign. Chloe had brought 2 of her equally pretentious friends along, women who smelled of expensive perfume and judgment. I was pouring the coffee, the ceramic mugs clinking softly against the granite counter, when I heard Chloe's voice floating clearly from the living room. She was speaking in that high-pitched, syrupy tone she always used when she was trying to impress someone. "Oh, don't worry about the deposit for the Aspen trip," she told her friends. "David's dad left a fortune from all that dirty cable-pulling work. It is finally doing something classy. Honestly, the old woman is basically just our walking trust fund at this point. She has no idea what to do with money anyway, sitting in this dusty museum of a house." I froze. The coffee pot hovered over the mug. A drop of dark liquid hit the counter, the sound loud in my own ears. I waited, holding my breath, waiting for my son to defend me. I waited for David to tell his wife that she was speaking about his mother, the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. Instead, I heard a low, familiar chuckle. "Come on, babe, keep your voice down," David said, sounding amused rather than angry. "She is going to hear you and cut off the circuit breaker to our accounts." They all laughed. My own son laughed at my expense, validating her cruel, dismissive words. I slowly set the coffee pot down. My hands were perfectly steady, but my heart was beating with a slow, heavy rhythm that felt entirely new. It was not sorrow. It was not the familiar heavy guilt of a mother worrying she was not doing enough. It was absolute, freezing clarity. I wiped the drop of coffee from the counter with a cloth, watching the dark stain disappear. I picked up the tray with the mugs and walked into the living room. Chloe looked up, her smile freezing for a fraction of a second before returning to its bright, artificial state. "Oh, thank you, Martha," she cooed, reaching for a cup. "You always make such quaint, strong coffee." I did not say a word. I just looked at her, really looked at her. And then I looked at my son. He avoided my gaze, suddenly very interested in the screen of his phone. I left the tray on the table and walked back into the kitchen. I did not yell. I did not throw them out. I simply waited for them to leave, which they did 30 minutes later, reminding me to sign the loan documents by Friday. As soon as the front door clicked shut, I walked straight to Arthur's old office. I sat down in his heavy leather chair. The room still smelled faintly of ozone and old paper. I opened the bottom drawer of the desk and pulled out the thick folder containing all my financial documents. I turned on the computer. The fan hummed loudly in the quiet house. I brought up the banking portal. For 7 years, I had maintained a joint account with David for emergencies, and I had given Chloe an authorized user card on my premium credit account for groceries and household essentials. I clicked on the recent transactions for Chloe's card. $300 at a high-end salon, $800 at a designer boutique, $150 at a gourmet wine shop, all in the last 3 days. Not a single grocery item. I took a deep breath, the air filling my lungs with a sudden, sharp energy. I clicked the button to freeze the credit card. The screen asked for confirmation. I clicked yes. Then I moved to the joint savings account, the one holding $50,000 of Arthur's hard-earned money. I opened a new browser tab, logged into my personal individual account, and initiated a wire transfer for the entire balance of the joint account, draining it down to zero. I removed David's access privileges. I changed all my passwords. I sat back in the chair and listened to the silence of the house. It was 5 o'clock in the evening. I knew exactly where they were going to be the next morning. Chloe's mother, a woman who treated me like the hired help, was in town. Chloe had bragged that they were taking her to the Oak Ridge Country Club for a lavish brunch to celebrate her retirement, a brunch they fully expected my credit card to cover. I slept that night with a profound, unbroken peace. I did not toss and turn. I did not worry about David's reaction. I simply rested. The next morning, I woke up at 7. I took a long, hot shower. I dressed in a comfortable pair of jeans and one of Arthur's soft flannel shirts. I made myself a simple breakfast of toast and eggs, eating slowly, savoring the taste. At exactly 10:30, my phone began to vibrate on the kitchen table. The caller ID showed David's name. I let it ring. It stopped, then immediately started again. I picked up my mug of tea, walked out to the back porch, and sat in my rocking chair. The morning air was crisp. The phone rang a third time. I finally pressed the green button and brought the phone to my ear. "Hello, David," I said, my voice completely flat and calm. Mom, what is going on with the accounts?" His voice was high, tight with panic, with the loud, echoing background noise of a busy restaurant behind him. I am at the country club with Chloe and her mother. The waiter just brought the card back. It says declined. I tried the debit card for the joint account, and it says insufficient funds. Mom, the bill is $600. People are looking at us. Call the bank right now. There has to be a mistake. There is no mistake, David, I said, watching a small bird land on the feeder in my yard. The card is canceled. The joint account is closed. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end. I could hear a waiter asking if everything was all right. I heard Chloe hissing something in the background. "What do you mean, canceled?" David whispered, his voice cracking. "Mom, this is not funny. Chloe's mother is sitting right across from me. We are going to look like absolute fools. You need to transfer money right now. We can talk about whatever is bothering you later, but I need you to fix this immediately." "I am fixing it, David," I replied. "I am fixing a 7-year mistake. Yesterday, I heard what your wife said about me. I heard her call me a walking trust fund. I heard her say your father's hard work was dirty money. But worst of all, my son, I heard you laugh. You laughed at the woman who has kept a roof over your head." "Mom, please," he begged, the panic morphing into desperation. "Chloe was just joking. You know how she is. She exaggerates for her friends. You are taking it out of context. Please, the manager is walking over here. You cannot do this to us in public." "You are 32 years old, David. You are a commercial electrician. You make a good salary. If you cannot afford a $600 brunch, you should not have ordered it. Figure it out." "You want me to wash dishes? Mom, this is humiliating. You are being cruel." "Cruel?" I repeated the word slowly, tasting it. "Cruel is spending a widow's savings on designer clothes while mocking her in her own home. Cruel is letting your wife treat your mother like an ATM. I love you, David, but the Bank of Arthur and Martha is permanently closed. Have a nice brunch." I hung up the phone. I did not turn it off. I simply placed it on the small wooden table next to my chair and watched it light up again and again. David called 6 times. Then Chloe called. I let them all go to voicemail. I sat on the porch for another hour, breathing in the fresh air, feeling lighter than I had in years. Around noon, I heard the aggressive crunch of tires on my gravel driveway. A car door slammed with violent force. I remained seated on the porch, out of sight from the front yard. Heavy, fast footsteps pounded up my front steps, followed by frantic, loud banging on my front door. "Martha, open the door right now!" It was Chloe's voice, shrill and completely devoid of her usual fake sweetness. The pounding continued. "Mom, please open up! We need to talk about this!" David's voice sounded exhausted. I did not move. I just listened. "This is insane!" Chloe shrieked, hitting the door again. "My mother had to pay the bill." Do you know how embarrassing that was? She had to pull out her own credit card because your mother is having some sort of psychotic break. "Martha, I know you are in there. Your car is in the driveway. You cannot just cut us off without warning." I stood up slowly, walked through the house, and opened the front door. Chloe had her fist raised to strike the wood again. She froze when she saw me. Her face was flushed red, her perfect hair slightly messy from the wind. David stood behind her, looking pale and sick. "Psychotic break?" I asked calmly, leaning against the doorframe. "Is that what we are calling financial boundaries now?" "You humiliated us," Chloe spat, stepping forward, invading my personal space. "You did that on purpose to embarrass me in front of my mother. You are vindictive and selfish." "Selfish?" I let out a short, dry laugh. "Chloe, the shirt you are wearing right now was paid for by my credit card. The car you drove here in has a loan that I am paying. The only thing selfish here is your belief that you are entitled to the money my husband broke his back to earn." "Mom, please." David stepped in front of his wife, holding his hands up placatingly. "Let us just go inside and sit down. We can figure out a budget. We can talk about how you feel. But you cannot just turn off the tap overnight. We have rent due on Monday. We have car payments. We have lifestyle expenses that we cannot cover on just my salary." "Then change your lifestyle," I stated simply. "Move to a smaller apartment. Return the cars. Get a job, Chloe. You are both healthy, capable adults." "I am not getting a job working a cash register," Chloe yelled, her mask completely gone, revealing the ugly, entitled reality underneath. "I manage our household. I manage David's career. You have no right to do this. That money belongs to David anyway. It is his inheritance." "I am not dead yet, Chloe," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "And it is not his inheritance. It is my money, my savings, and as of this morning, neither of you will see another dime of it. Now get off my porch before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing." David stared at me, his eyes wide with genuine shock. He had never heard me speak like this. For his entire life, I had been the soft landing pad, the endless source of forgiveness and cash. He realized in that moment that the mother he knew was gone, replaced by a woman who finally remembered her own worth. "You do not mean that," David whispered. "I do," I replied. I stepped back and closed the door firmly in their faces. I locked the deadbolt. I walked back to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of cold water, and drank it slowly. The silence in the house was beautiful. Over the next 3 days, my phone became a battlefield. I received lengthy text messages from David, swinging wildly between apologies and accusations. I received passive-aggressive messages from Chloe, claiming I was destroying their marriage. But the most alarming contact came on Wednesday morning. I was in the garden pulling weeds when a luxury sedan pulled up to my curb. Chloe's mother, a woman named Barbara, stepped out. She wore a tailored suit and heavy jewelry, looking completely out of place in my quiet, working-class neighborhood. She walked up the driveway with a purposeful, intimidating stride. I stood up, wiping the dirt from my gardening gloves, and waited for her at the gate. "Martha," Barbara said, her tone dripping with condescension. "We need to have a serious conversation." "I have nothing to say to you, Barbara," I replied, not opening the gate. "Well, you are going to listen," she countered, crossing her arms. "Chloe is a wreck. David is talking about having to sell their loft. You have completely destabilized their lives over a petty misunderstanding. Now, I understand you are grieving Arthur, even after all these years, but this erratic behavior is deeply concerning." "Erratic?" I raised an eyebrow. "Cutting off financial leeches is not erratic. It is sensible." Barbara narrowed her eyes. "If you continue down this path, Martha, If you refuse to support your own son, I will have no choice but to advise Chloe to seek legal counsel. There are mechanisms in place for elderly individuals who are no longer capable of managing their finances. A power of attorney can be reassigned if someone is deemed mentally incompetent. Your behavior yesterday at the restaurant was clearly a cry for help. I felt a cold chill wash over me, not of fear, but of absolute fury. They were not just trying to manipulate me emotionally anymore. They were threatening to strip me of my autonomy. They were threatening to declare me insane just to get their hands on my money. "Are you threatening to try and take control of my estate, Barbara?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "I am simply saying that families need to protect their assets when a senior member starts acting irrationally." She smiled a tight, venomous smile. "It would be a shame to drag this through the courts. Just reactivate the cards, apologize to Chloe, and we can all move past this." I looked at her, memorizing the smug certainty on her face. "Get off my property, Barbara," I said softly, "and if you or your daughter ever threaten me again, you will find out exactly how competent I am." I watched her drive away, and then I went straight inside and picked up the phone. I called an old friend of Arthur's, a man named Thomas, who had started out as an electrician and eventually put himself through law school to become a prominent estate attorney. I told him everything: the money, the insults, and Barbara's thinly veiled threat of a competency hearing. Thomas got me into his office that very afternoon. We spent 4 hours rewriting my entire estate plan. We set up an irrevocable trust. We designated charities for the majority of the funds. We explicitly wrote Chloe out of everything. And we put a clause in for David that stated he would only receive a small, fixed monthly stipend upon my death, and only if he was actively employed. But Thomas went a step further. "Martha, if they are threatening a competency hearing, we need to strike first," he said, sliding a card across his desk. "This is Dr. Evans. She is a respected geriatric psychiatrist. I want you to go see her tomorrow. Get a full, documented psychological evaluation. Once we have a medical professional stating you are of sound mind and acting rationally to stop financial abuse, they won't have a leg to stand on in court." I made the appointment. The next day, I sat in a clinical office and spent 3 hours taking cognitive tests, answering questions about my memory, my decisions, and my reasoning. At the end of the session, Dr. Evans looked at me with a sympathetic smile. "Martha, your cognitive function is exceptionally sharp. Furthermore, establishing boundaries to stop financial exploitation is the most rational thing you could possibly do. I will have the full report sent to your lawyer tomorrow. You are perfectly competent." With that document secured in my legal file, the last remnants of anxiety evaporated from my chest. I was safe. My money was safe. My future was mine again. Over the next month, the reality of their situation crashed down on David and Chloe. Without my money to bridge the gap, their lifestyle collapsed like a house of cards. They could not pay the rent on the downtown loft. I heard through a mutual family friend that Chloe had thrown a massive tantrum, screaming that she would rather die than live in a regular apartment in the suburbs. But David had no choice. They broke their lease, losing their deposit, and moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment 30 minutes outside the city. The luxury cars were repossessed when David could not make the massive monthly payments. He had to buy a cheap 10-year-old sedan just to get to his job sites. Chloe was forced to get a job working at a high-end retail boutique, the very place she used to spend my money folding clothes for minimum wage just to help cover their basic groceries. I did not reach out. I spent my days reading, working in my garden, and for the first time in years, planning something for myself. I booked a 2-week cabin retreat in the Smoky Mountains with my neighbor, a lovely widow named Susan, who had also spent her life serving others. We went hiking, we drank wine on the porch, and we laughed until our ribs ached. I breathed the mountain air and felt a profound, heavy weight lift off my shoulders. I was not a bank. I was not a walking trust fund. I was Martha. When I returned from my trip, there was a letter in my mailbox. It was handwritten, the handwriting messy and familiar. It was from David. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had heard my son laugh at my expense, and opened the envelope. "Mom," the letter began, "I do not expect you to forgive me. I do not even expect you to call me back, but I need to say that I am sorry. These past 2 months have been the hardest of my life, but they have also forced me to open my eyes. I have been acting like a spoiled child. I let Chloe disrespect you, and worse, I disrespected you myself. I forgot how hard you and Dad worked for everything we had. I forgot that your job was to be my mother, not my endless safety net." Moving into this small apartment, having to budget for groceries, watching Chloe complain every single day about having to work, it made me realize the terrible dynamic I allowed to control my life. We are barely scraping by, but for the first time, I am actually standing on my own 2 feet. I miss you, Mom. I miss just coming over to have coffee and talk about Dad. If you never want to help me financially again, I completely understand and accept that, but I hope someday you might let me just be your son again. Love, David. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. I did not cry. I felt a quiet, sturdy sense of satisfaction. The lesson had been brutal, but it had worked. I picked up the phone and dialed his number. He answered on the first ring, his voice tentative. "Hello?" "David," I said softly. "I am making a roast this Sunday. You can come over for dinner. Just you." "Mom, thank you. Thank you so much. I will be there." "And David," I added, my voice firming up, "bring your own work boots. There is a broken circuit breaker in the garage that Arthur never got around to fixing. If you want to eat my roast, you are going to earn it with your own hands." I heard a genuine emotional laugh break through his voice. "Yes, ma'am, I will bring my tools." I hung up the phone and smiled. It took a lifetime to build that foundation, and I was finally standing on it. What do you guys think about how I handled this whole mess? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel for more.